Hello, you're watching VNA News Bulletin. I'm Bảo Ngọc from Hanoi, and now the headlines. Prime Minister returns to Hanoi following expanded G7 summit and Japan's visit. Non-smoking campaign launched in Hanoi. Vietnam's workforce to reach over 54.4 million in second quarter. Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc arrived in Hanoi on May 29th, concluding his three-day visit to Japan at the invitation of his Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe. During the three-day stay, Prime Minister Phúc attended the plenary session of the expanded Group of 7 G7 summit in the Japanese prefecture of Mie, held talks with Prime Minister Abe in Tokyo, and met bilaterally with leaders of G7 and heads of international organizations. In his speech, the Vietnamese Prime Minister hailed Japan's decision to expand its expanded partnership for quality infrastructure initiative. He also shared G7 and ASEAN member states' concerns over threat to peace, stability, and freedom of navigation and aviation in the EC.
Ensuring peace, security, safety and freedom of maritime and aviation in the East Sea is the common concern of the international community. At the expanded group of G7 summit, UN General Secretary Ban Ki-moon and Indonesian President Joko Widodo expressed their opinions about peace and stability in the East Sea region. They said all countries must contribute to ensuring peace and stability in the region, settle disputes through peaceful measures, respect to international laws, especially the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
The Prime Minister pressed for practical actions to enhance an environment of peace and stability, as well as settle common issues in the region and the world, particularly sustainable development goals, infrastructure ramp-up, disaster prevention, climate change response, anti-terrorism, food and water resources security, among others. On the sidelines of the summit, the leader met bilaterally with Sri Lankan President, Secretary General of the United Nations, General Director of the International Monetary Fund, Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, French President, Canadian Prime Minister, President of the European Commission, and President of the European Council, and German Chancellor. During the meetings, the Prime Minister wished the countries and partners would work closely with Vietnam at regional and international forums. Vietnam always strives to develop ties with countries globally in the spirit of being a friend, trustworthy partner, and responsible member of the international community, he said. Speaking to 1,500 Japanese firms in the Vietnam-Japan high-level economic policy dialogue in the tourist city of Nagoya, Prime Minister Phúc pledged to continue fine-tuning legal regulations to create a more stable and transparent business environment for investors, particularly Japanese ones. On May 27th, the Prime Minister visited the Ise Temple in Mie Prefecture and the Yokoyama Farm, a model of clean agricultural production in Aichi Prefecture. During their talks in Tokyo on May 28th, the Vietnamese and Japanese Prime Ministers reached consensus on specific measures to lift the bilateral extensive strategic partnership in the foreseeable future. They stressed the importance of ensuring peace, security, safety, and freedom of navigation and aviation in the EC. Sharing view, the parties concerned should prevent actions that change the status quo, complicated and extend disputes, and militarization in the EC, while seriously abiding by international law. Following the talks, host and guests witnessed the signing of 5 agreements. 4 of them relate to the provision of official development assistance, worth $1.5 billion for Vietnam. The Vietnam Women's Union, in coordination with the Ministry of Health, on May 29th launched a campaign on non-smoking homes. Vice President Đặng Thị Ngọc Thịnh attended the event. Vietnam is among 15 countries with the highest number of smokers worldwide. 47% of Vietnamese smokers are male. The rates of passive smoking both at home and workplaces in the country are over 67% and 49% respectively. It is estimated that Vietnamese people spend $630 million for tobacco, 10 times higher than state budget for education. The campaign calls for women to help their family members stop this bad habit, while urging male and community to build a non-smoking environment both at home and working place. At the event, a representative from the Vietnam Women's Union urged every woman to play a bigger role in building a non-smoking community for the sake of people's health and future generations. Vietnam's tuna exports to China have risen sharply this year, but exports to traditional markets like the US, EU and Japan have fallen. More details in the following report.
According to the Vietnam Association of Seafood Exporters and Producers, or VASEP, tuna exports in the first quarter fell by 5.5% year-on-year to $98.5 million. Shipments to the U.S. decreased by 4.4% to $36 million, while exports to the EU and Japan dropped by 14.3% and 6% to $24.2 million and $3.8 million respectively. On the contrary, tuna exports to China saw a year-on-year increase of 253% to almost $7 million. Appearing among the top 10 tuna buyers from Vietnam since last year, China is a promising market that has replaced Japan in fourth place. Vietnam exported tuna to 85 countries and territories, though the US, EU, ASEAN, China, Israel, Japan, Mexico, and Canada accounted for nearly 88%. VASEP attributed the fall in exports to key traditional markets to the scarcity of the fish, complex regulations on the import of national tuna in those countries, and food safety, origin, and packaging requirements.
Foreign direct investment worth nearly $10.16 billion flowed into Vietnam in the first 5 months of this year, an increase of more than 136% from the same period last year.
As of May 20th, Vietnam has 907 new FDI projects with a total registered capital of $7.56 billion, a year-on-year rise of nearly 156%, while 425 adjusted capital projects brought in $2.59 billion, up 93.3% from last year. Some $5.8 billion was disbursed, rising 17.2% against a year ago. Hanoi topped other localities to become the most attractive destination for foreign investors. The capital city lured $1.96 billion in FDI in the period, accounting for 19.3% of total registered FDI in the country. It was followed by Haiphong and Dong Nai province. A large amount of investments were in the processing and manufacturing sector. The Republic of Korea remains the top investor among 45 countries and territories that invested in Vietnam in the period.
Vietnam's workforce is estimated to reach 54.47 million in the second quarter this year, a slight rise of only 0.4% of the first quarter.
Some sectors are predicted to attract more laborers compared to quarter one, including the processing and manufacturing industry, the construction and communications sectors. However, even though the agroforestry and fishery sectors and education will have less laborers, the unemployment rate is forecast to decrease by about 1.9%. Three sectors with the highest rise in laborers were finance, banking and services, while the processing and manufacturing industry, agroforestry and fishery saw a slight drop. In quarter one, about 1 million people at working age were reported as unemployed, 20,700 people higher than in Q4 2015, including 411,000 skilled workers.
The Japanese government has announced a non-refundable emergency aid worth $2.5 million for Vietnam to address drought and saltwater intrusion consequences in the Central and Mekong Delta regions since late 2014 due to the effects of El Niño.
The Japanese embassy reported the aid will be delivered through the United Nations Children's Fund. It will be used for providing hard-hit areas with clean water, sanitation and food based on the situation and damages caused by the drought and saltwater intrusion, such as reduced agricultural production, a lack of fresh water and food, and malnourished women and children. Japan will cooperate with Vietnam to quickly deploy the aid, as well as consider cooperation concerning responsive measures in the medium and long terms on the issue.
The Central Coastal Province of Khánh Hòa welcomed 1.6 million foreign tourists in the first 5 months of the year, an increase of 14.3% year-on-year.
Foreign visitors numbered 446,200. Most tourists came from China and Russia and stayed for an average of 4 days. Revenue from tourism topped $121.5 million, a 21.1% rise. Khánh Hòa has become an ideal destination for both domestic and foreign travelers thanks to its intriguing sea and island tourism, gentle climate, stable price and quality services. Last year, the province served more than 4.1 million tourists, including around 974,000 foreigners, grossing $315 million. It aims to welcome 4.5 million visitors in 2016.
The second Vietnamese opera debuted at the Hanoi Opera House, marking a milestone for Vietnamese opera art. The first one debuted some 40 years ago.
The opera titled La Dao or Red Leaf is performed by artists from the Vietnam National Opera and Ballet and the Vietnam National Symphony and Orchestra. The performance illustrates the spirit of national resistance against the French and the Americans. Musician Đỗ Hồng Quân composes the music for La Dao based on the poetry of writer Nguyễn Thị Hồng Ngát.
This is a major work that we have cherished for so long. Through 3 years of hard work, the opera is performed by a collective of more than 120 actors and actresses. I hope that this play will contribute to promoting Vietnamese music.
Trên hết là cái tình cảm của các nhạc sĩ.
Tôi được nhạc sĩ Đỗ Hồng Quân rất là tin cậy mời cộng tác.
My work is a tribute to those who sacrificed for the country and for young people to see how our forefathers did during their years of youth. They lived in the jungle under bombs and bullets, but they were still very romantic, loved and believed in their lives.
Tôi thấy cũng đủ cái độ chín để viết nên cái kịch bản Lá Đỏ.
The opera comprises 2 acts and 6 scenes. It is expected to resonate with the Vietnamese audience, as it is only the second made-in-Vietnam opera stage production in the country's history. The first Vietnamese opera was performed in 1965.
And that has wrapped up our news bulletin. Thanks for joining us, and goodbye for now.